Hello, e-surfing, water sports, and lake pal friends. This video is intended to share with you my review and experience with the Telesin Video Extended Video Stick. This stick can extend up to a very long 9 feet in length, but I actually have it set at its now modified maximum 6 feet. And that is the large part of this video, is to share with you the modification that I have created to create this safety flotation tethering anchor system throughout the length of the stick and attached to the camera, or rather the cage at the end of the camera. Overall, this system that I have rigged up inside creates as many problems as it does the problem that it solves. So I'd only recommend doing this the way that I've done it if you are particularly really worried about losing your camera, and you may get some inspiration and do it differently than what I've done. I myself was inspired by another writer who did a similar tethering system on Facebook, and I'll have a link to that Facebook eFoil group page discussion for additional inspiration that you can gather from as well. So let me back up to when I first started videoing my eFoil rides. I started with the Insta360 1X2 on an Insta360 1 meter or 3 foot selfie stick. And as my skills improved and I got better at holding the stick out at length, I wanted to get a longer stick so that I could better show off the beauty of Lake Powell and have the wider views, and to kind of eliminate the fisheye distortion that you get when you're holding a stick at a closer range. I looked up extended selfie sticks, and the 360 brand selfie stick for the extended version was quite expensive, but the Telesin one was much more affordable. And I used the Telesin video stick, very risky, for 2 years, because all I used was the wrist lanyard. I didn't have any flotation at all, and nothing else rigging up to preserve potential loss of the camera. And I had all sorts of situations where the camera dipped into the water and my reflexes were able to allow my wrist to twist it around and pull it back out of the water without any harm to the stick or loss of the camera. I've done bullet time effects where I've swung the stick above my head, even from the wrist lanyard, which was really risky because the string could have broke. So I've been really risky with my camera for about 2 years, and so I kind of feel like the loss of a camera was finally coming upon me. And it was really an unfortunate, ironic event. I bought all of this stuff to rig up this system with the inspiration that I had from Facebook. And I was just so busy, I never had it put together. And then about a week or two later, I broke the end of my stick and lost my camera. So the stick didn't break of any fault of itself. It was because the stick went into the water directly in front of me, and then it hit the wing beneath me in the water at a moderate speed. But regardless of the speed, when you have that kind of resistance, especially against a pointulant edge of the wing, yeah, it's going to snap, it's going to break. And losing my camera affected me so much, not so much because of the financial loss, but also because there was footage on the camera, luckily only from that day, because I was smart enough to dump the footage a day or two before. So I only lost the footage of that day's ride, but that day's ride was a historic ride because it was the opening of the Castle Rock Cut, which hadn't been opened in years, and I wanted to be the first one to get to the other side and ride in the body of water on the other side. And so losing that footage really hit me hard. And so I don't have the courage to use this stick in such a risky manner as I once did. And so I'd rather have the disadvantages that this system brings by having the advantage of less worry. So allow me to share with you the things that I've done real quick, and then you can get into greater detail in the remainder video of the process that I use to feed a big game 60-pound fishing line from these flotations, there's 3 of them, through the stick and to this cage that is holding the camera. If there's anyone from Insta360 watching, I would really love it, and I'd suggest making an anchor point on the camera itself, because I would have much rather have tied this fishing line to the camera itself rather than this cage, because the cage, although it is light in of itself, the extra weight when you're holding this at length is really difficult. It's really noticeable. And so that's one of the drawbacks, is when you put this cage on here, you are going to feel it. It's hard enough to hold a stick at length as it is, but that extra weight just makes it that much worse. And then this cage, it has a door at the top that's held on by this one screw. And if that screw were to fail, the camera is gone. That's why we need a tether on the camera itself. So I've actually super glued the cage shut to prevent it from falling out, which means I will never be able to take the camera out to use it on some other stick or some other situation, but that's okay. I plan to use it just for foiling and using it on the stick only. So that's another drawback of the way that I've done this. It's stuck to the stick. This is all just kind of like semi-permanently all one piece. And then you can see at the end here, I had to attempt drilling different holes until I found an opening. So that's something that I really love about this stick, is there's a lot of hardware here. So the very end of the stick is not just a measly chunk of aluminum ending here or here. It goes down at least like 1.25 inches. So I had to drill 2 inches down before I found a hollow section of the tube to put the line through. The reason that it cannot extend any longer than 6 feet is I was really dumb, and not any fault of the stick again, but my own fault. I broke the stick at the last, second to the last segment. I was putting it in my car, and it was sticking out the driver's side, and then a gust of wind slammed the door on the stick and broke it. Initially, I was really mad about it, but I was like, okay, I can glue the final 2 sections together, because I really don't like using it at 9 feet. It's excessive and it's hard to hold because of the extra weight at the end of the stick. So I glued the last 2 sections together, doing the best I could to fit the broken pieces of that second section together and gluing it in here with shoe goo. A lot of you know that watch my videos, I love shoe goo for water sports repair. You can also use amazing goop. The difference between goop and shoe goo is more flexible, and the goop is more hard when it dries. But other than that, they're pretty much the same glue. While I was doing that repair, I had the idea to add some additional flotation and security in the final 2 sections of the selfie stick. Also because I didn't want this section hitting the fishing line and wearing it out over time. So now when it collapses, the fishing line can easily go inside this 3rd section. Whereas the second to the last section, when it closed, it would hit it hard and scrub up against it. So that was another reason that I decided to put some foam inside. I used some expanding foam from the hardware store that you would use for sealing windows and cracks around your home or other places on your property. And so I squirted that into the last 2 ends of the stick to provide extra flotation and to make it stronger and to prevent these last 2 sections from collapsing. So it still collapses to a pretty manageable length. So right about there, I will have some links in the description on the various products that I've used so that you can either buy the same ones or, again, get some inspiration, because I'm definitely not claiming that my system is the best. And then I want to point out that, so these are tied to the fishing line and they are tied to the wrist lanyard as well, because if you tie them only to the fishing line, when you collapse it, that fishing line is going to pull out the back, and then you're going to end up with the floaties way down here, they're not going to stay manageable right here. So you need to tie them to the fishing line so that if this breaks, the flotation is essentially connected to the camera, or rather the cage, and hoping the camera stays inside the cage. And then also to the lanyards so that they don't extend out the side and flop around so much. There you have it. Live life to the fullest, no matter how or what you're doing for your video equipment. My local hunting and fishing store had this large spool of 60-pound test fishing line that I was able to take 10 feet of home. And then I chose a 1/16 drill bit size, the larger of these two. The other one was a 5/64, but the 1/16 was easier to feed the fishing line through the hole. And here's the inside of the Telesin extended selfie stick. It's really easy to just simply screw off the back end of the selfie stick. On the back side of the ventilation cap, you will see a small hole that serves as a ventilation hole to allow air to escape from the inside of the selfie stick. This allows it to more easily be collapsed and extended during use. The inside will also reveal that each stick extension has a wider, different colored part that helps the stick to lock in place when it's extended and to help prevent each section from overextending and coming completely out. I forgot to turn the camera on when I was drilling my fourth and final hole in the inner rod to find the cavity, and I found it at 2 inches. So if you're looking for the cavity, you can definitely find it at 2 inches down from the top of the rod. You might even find it at 1.5, but definitely at 2 inches. And now it's time to feed this 60-pound fishing line down through the center of the rods and out the bottom. While the selfie stick is in a more collapsed position, it will be far easier to feed the line through initially. So once you get it out the bottom, it'll be really easy. You can just hold on to one end of the fishing line and extend the selfie stick until you feed all 9 feet plus length of fishing wire through the length of the selfie stick. Or if you have a shorter one, then of course you can use a shorter fishing line. So here's the bottom end of the selfie stick, which screws off easily. And there's already this amazing little hole, just the right size. And that hole leads right through the bottom insert hole of the butt end of the selfie stick. I mean, it's like it was made for it. It's perfect. Here I am showing how I looped through and tied the fishing line to the 2 legs at the bottom of the camera cage. These 2 legs, when folded down, form a linkage as seen with GoPro gear. To reduce tangles, you'll want to spin the cable around the pole 3 times in the opposite direction of screwing the camera down. And once you screw the camera down, then it's going to unravel all of those lines and make it straight. Feed the excess fishing line back through the hole at the top of the selfie stick, as shown here. The stick is fully extended and the safety system is nearly complete. All that's remaining is to attach the flotation, but be sure to not only attach it to the fishing line, but also to the wrist lanyard as well. It does collapse, not all the way of course, because you have this string sticking out. That's going to prevent you from collapsing it all the way. And then there's going to be a bunch of line bunched up at the bottom, so if we had x-ray vision, we'd see quite a coil of line that's keeping it from going the rest of the way down. It's kind of smushing it down there. Here is the selfie stick extended to different lengths. Here we have it extended to 3 feet. And here we have it extended to 6 feet. And lastly, the full entire length. 9 feet, or roughly close to it. I want to point out this one major weakness right here. So if this were to pop open, if something were to fail, like the screw were to get stripped out, then your camera is going to slide out and it's going to be gone. So I'm going to super glue this shut, which means the camera is not going to come out of here again. I may even have someone help me weld it. But it's got all the necessary openings for charging, taking the battery out, etc. So that's something I wanted to point out when you're shopping around for a particular cage if you're trying to duplicate this system. And then when you do install the cage more permanently, you want to make sure that you put in the camera correctly. Otherwise, you will have these openings swapped, and that would not be good. So make sure you have the battery port and charging port correct and the buttons correct before you do anything more permanent to close the cage. Some cages have more coverage, and while that may seem safer, I've heard, I don't have personal experience because I've never covered it with a more covering type cage, but supposedly they overheat easily when they're more covered with the different types of cages that go completely around the camera and only leave openings for the screen and the buttons and the ports and the lens. So you'll need a cage that has some openings so that it will not overheat. Unfortunately, I broke this video stick too in a very embarrassing and unfortunate way. I had it sticking out my car door and the wind caught the door and then it broke the very end of it. So I'm going to do a bit of a jimmy rig repair and continue to use it. But when it broke, it revealed this tangle here. And as I've extended the stick on a few occasions when I've used the full 9-foot length or 3-meter length, I could feel that there was something hanging up and something snagging. And so despite, this length of fishing line being the 9 feet inside and little room for it to move around, it still created a knot. So if you do decide to rig up your selfie stick with fishing line in the way that I've done, there's a good chance that it could end up in a knot at some point. All right, I got it untangled, and this could be the cause for the reason that a bungee type safety lanyard was used instead on the Facebook post that I was inspired by for this safety lanyard system running through the video stick. So I just felt that the bungee style would wear out and would be less strong, less reliable. So I went with the fishing line, but then the fishing line can potentially get tangled up inside the tube. You can see from it shortening and lengthening, it's become like permanently coiled and potentially a problem with tangling and turning into knots inside the selfie stick. So I don't know, this whole safety lanyard system creates just as many problems, if not more so, than just trying to be careful and making sure that you dump the files as often as possible so that if you do lose your camera, you will only lose the footage from that day's ride. Shoe glue and goop are two of my favorite glues, but you can use whatever glue necessary to glue 2 or more sections of your selfie stick together as you deem necessary. I used the home expanding foam sealant on the last 2 sections of the selfie stick. Before I started squirting this expanding foam sealant into the end of my selfie stick, I taped this everyday sipping straw to the end of the tube so that I could ensure that the foam would start at the very end, and then I slowly pulled the tube back as I was slowly squirting and adding in the foam. But do remember, this stuff expands a lot, so you'll want to stop squirting sooner than you think. It's really important to notice the position that I have my selfie stick placed in. Here you will notice that the foam is expanding out the drill hole at the top of the selfie stick. This foam expands a lot, so if you can place your selfie stick in this way so that if there is any excess of foam expanding, it will not enter a section of the selfie stick that you do not want to have foam inside. This foam is very sticky and is almost like a glue. You don't want it to glue together any additional sections that you do not want to be stuck together.